Welcome to this explainer of FOGS at War, a chronicle of division, memory, and the GOAT that started it all by Hasek Twinovich. I am absolutely thrilled to share this with you today because, honestly, we are looking at an absolute masterclass in holding a grudge. We're stepping right into the Balkans to explore an incredibly petty, completely ridiculous, yet deeply human historical dispute between two small Serbian mountain villages. It's a feud with no famous battles, zero strategic value, and frankly no real point, yet somehow it survived the rise and fall of entire empires.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to follow a chronological journey spanning over a millennium. First up, the GOAT that started it. Second, surviving empires and bureaucracies. Third, competing through the 20th century. Fourth, the feud goes digital. And finally, number 5, the long goodbye.
Section 1. The GOAT that started it. The petty origins of a permanent grudge.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this absurdity, we have to ground ourselves in their foundational myths. The Lower Valley village of Donja Magla claims they were founded in 641 AD because a very decisive, superior cow stopped at an optimal spring. Meanwhile, the Upper Mountain village of Gornja Magla claims they were founded in 642 AD because a tired cow stopped at a protected spring. So they have literally been arguing over whose cow had better judgment for over a millennium. For 170 years, they somehow managed a grudging coexistence. But then, in the year 812 AD, came the GOAT. A black and white goat of disputed ownership wandered right between the two settlements.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the exact same historical event gets filtered through two completely unhinged, deeply biased perspectives. Gornja Magla's elder went down to the valley to claim the goat, sparking a confrontation. In Gornja Magla's official oral history, this is forever known as the Great Goat Theft, which obviously proves that the valley dwellers were opportunistic thieves. But Donja Magla remembers this exact same day as the attempted mountain raid, proving the upper villagers were unhinged, territorial aggressors trying to steal a goat the valley had lovingly fostered.
All right, let's pivot to objective reality for a second. What actually happened? Well, two stubborn men argued about a goat. Neither one could actually prove they owned it. The goat, apparently demonstrating way more wisdom than either human involved, got embarrassed by the whole display, wandered into the forest, and was literally never seen again. But the men? Oh, they stayed angry. And that anger lasted 1,200 years. Just let that number land for a second. 1,200 years. Generation after generation, completely separated socially, never intermarrying, all to maintain a permanent feud over an animal that neither side could even prove they owned in the first place.
Section 2. Surviving empires and bureaucrats. Institutionalizing the hatred.
Flash forward to 887 AD. A Byzantine tax collector arrives to take a census. Both villages treated this poor guy to an absolute masterclass in passive aggression. Gornja Magla played the role of the rustic, traditional village, giving highly vague, approximate numbers, essentially telling the bureaucrat that chickens are fundamentally uncountable. Donja Magla, meanwhile, claimed to be a highly precise, modern community with designated rememberers, offering exact yet ultimately useless estimates. And the best part of all this? Both villages spent their entire census interview warning the imperial official that the other village was full of liars and idiots.
So, the crucial point is, empires come and go, right? But the feud is eternal. 600 years later, in 1459, the Ottoman Empire arrives to do their own census, and the exact same dynamic plays out. Gornja Magla gives vague numbers and warns the Ottomans about the valley. Donja Magla gives hyper-specific numbers and warns the Ottomans about the mountain. The Ottoman bureaucrat literally filed a report suggesting that the empire should just let them hate each other because it seemed to give their lives meaning. Both villages ended up paying identical taxes, but both smugly assumed the other side had cheated and completely failed.
Section 3. Competing through the 20th century. Modernization and real stakes.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dark mathematics of suffering. During World War I, both villages were conscripted, requisitioned, and devastated. It was a terrible, shared tragedy. But instead of uniting them, they turned their grief into a morbid scoreboard. Donja Magla lost 11 men, so they claimed they suffered more in absolute numbers. Gornja Magla lost 8 men, but since their population was slightly smaller, they claimed they suffered more as a percentage of their population. They literally quantified their grief just to avoid admitting that they had both suffered equally.
This exact pattern carried right on into World War II with Baba Milica. She was a 68-year-old grandmother who miraculously sheltered 2 wounded enemy soldiers, one partisan, one Chetnik, at the exact same time without either knowing about the other. It was an act of profound human courage. But instead of honoring her shared humanity, the villages just argue over who gets to own her legacy. Gornya Magla claims her because she lived her adult life and performed the act up there. Donya Magla claims her because she was born and raised down in their valley, meaning her character was obviously forged by them. They completely missed the point that she saved those boys because she was a grandmother, not because she cared about their petty village borders.
Now, jump to 1967. A mere 3-week gap in infrastructure created the next major battleground. The Yugoslav government was bringing electricity to the region. Because Donja Magla was in the valley, it was logistically easier to reach, so they got connected to the power grid exactly 3 weeks before Gornya Magla. Donja Magla threw a massive party and turned on literally every light to gloat. Gornya Magla, of course, viewed this 3-week delay as a profound historical betrayal driven by deep-seated corruption. An infrastructure gap of 21 days was instantly cemented as an eternal psychological victory.
Let's move forward and see how this builds, because this stubbornness only escalates. In 1993, Yugoslavia suffered an apocalyptic economic collapse with a 313 million% monthly inflation rate. Money became entirely worthless. How did the villages survive? By doing the exact same thing, trading goods for services without using money. But Gornya Magla called it traditional community barter, proudly claiming their traditional mountain values saved them. Donya Magla called it systematic ledger barter, proudly claiming their highly organized formal valley system saved them. They literally turned a catastrophic national economic collapse into yet another argument over methodological superiority.
Section 4. The feud goes digital. Old hatreds, new platforms.
When Facebook hit the scene in 2008, the centuries-old oral tradition of hating each other finally became digitized. And the typical Facebook fight follows a highly predictable, incredibly ritualized structure. Step 1, an innocuous trigger post, like a lovely photo of spring fog. Step 2, a defensive escalation where one village claims their fog is obviously thicker. Step 3, diaspora members from Australia and Germany jump in to fan the flames. Step 4, someone inevitably brings up the goat from 812 AD. And Step 5, exhausted regional admins just lock the thread. The platforms change, sure, but the feud simply adapts.
Which brings us to an absolutely hilarious incident from August 2024. Both villages actually scheduled weddings on the exact same day. And because both villages are essentially in the exact same location, the GPS of several confused diaspora guests and a few random British tourists led them to Donja Magla in the valley first. Gornya Magla immediately accused the valley of trying to sabotage their authentic traditional wedding. Donja Magla bragged about how graciously they hosted the mountain's lost, confused relatives at their own highly sophisticated wedding.
But here comes another deadpan objective reality pivot. Those British wedding tourists who accidentally went to both weddings, they wrote a blog post comparing them. Their review explicitly noted that both had identical Orthodox ceremonies, identical stuffed cabbage sarma, and identical traditional dancing. The tourists concluded the weddings were, and I quote, essentially identical. Well, for the first time in 1,200 years, both villages actually agreed on something. They were both absolutely furious at the British tourists for failing to notice their vast, irreconcilable differences.
If you can't define yourself by what you are, define yourself by what you're not. This quote from the author really hits the philosophical core of this whole explainer. You see, this isn't just about a goat or taxes or electricity. This is human nature. This is how identity is constructed. These villages are so overwhelmingly similar that the only way they can maintain their unique identities is through relentless, exhausting opposition to one another.
Section 5. The Long Goodbye. The Mathematics of Decline.
The stark, unavoidable reality of rural depopulation is hitting both these places incredibly hard. Back in 1900, Gornya Magla had 350 people. Today, they have just 73. Donya Magla had 380. Today, they're down to 89. Young people leave for jobs and education in the cities, and they just don't come back. The math here is pretty clear. By 2070, both of these villages will likely be entirely empty. Despite their fierce rivalry, they are ultimately dying out at the exact same rate.
And yet, even staring down inevitable demographic extinction, they have managed to turn the act of dying into one final desperate competition. Gornya Magla believes their mountain isolation and stubbornness will keep them holding on the longest. Donya Magla believes their valley accessibility and internet connection means they will outlive the mountain. They are quite literally competing over who gets to be the last person to turn off the lights. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. When both villages finally fade into the fog, what was the point of 1,200 years of hatred? All that energy, all those endless arguments over cows and goats and Byzantine taxes and Facebook posts, against the unstoppable march of time, it all just vanishes. But then again, maybe that shared argument was the only thing keeping them alive in the first place. Think about that the next time you find yourself arguing with someone on the internet. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you a fascinating new perspective on human nature.